Welcome, everyone here in person who made it despite the weather, and everyone online on Zoom. We are greatly appreciative of you coming to enjoy this wonderful meeting that we're going to have tonight. My name is Jenny Hancock, and I'm the chair for the Houston Ions. And just a couple of housekeeping things first. Restrooms down the hall to the right and around the corner. They do request no food in the room, but we do have some water if you need some water out there. After the meeting, we invite you to join us at Barnaby's for extra discussion and a little more information about to dive deeper into the topic. If you wish to receive notices, then you can, and you're not currently doing it, then you can sign up in the back, or you can put it in the chat if you're not getting the notices, and I'll get you logged into us. Our Houston Ions community group serves members and friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the original National Ions Group, a nonprofit organization dedicated to research and education on consciousness, human potential, and personal and social transformation. The National Ions is based in California, and it investigates mystical, anomalous, and related experiences. Our Houston group first gathered in about 1999. We invite local savants in the fields to share with us their related experience and information. The Houston Ions Community Group, however, is a totally independent institute of the Noetic National Organization, and we're financially responsible for all of the work that we do and everything, the activities. The views expressed by the leaders and the workshop facilitators and participants do not necessarily reflect the views of the national organization. But over 50 years ago, Dr. Edgar Mitchell became the sixth person to walk on the moon. Can you imagine? Isn't that cool? As a member of the Apollo 14 mission, his purpose was to conduct scientific research on the lunar surface. But as his spaceship traveled back from the moon, Dr. Mitchell had a life-changing mystical experience. With his eyes fixed on the blue sphere of the Earth, set against the vast darkness of the cosmos, he was enveloped by profound sense of this universal connectedness, of a governing cosmic intelligence, and of the interconnectedness of all humanity. A new purpose emerged that would define his life for decades to come. Edgar Mitchell founded Ions to bridge the scientific exploration and deep human intuition, and to contribute to the awakening of the planet. So tonight, I'm going to welcome Mark Bryant up to introduce our speaker, and we will get into our topic. Thank you, Mark.
Well, welcome. It would be a challenge to imagine anyone more suited, I think, to the mission of the Institute of Noetic Sciences than our speaker for tonight. That mission recognizes the value of two fundamental modes of human knowing: the exacting, rational, empirical, test-focused approach of the sciences, and the far-reaching, personal, experiential, often ineffable grasp of human intuition. It strives to bring harmony into harmony, the outer, demonstrable, evidence-based propositions of science with the inner, subconsciously incorporated insights of what we call gnosis. Eva Zsigmond is a scientist of the first order, with a master's degree in nutritional science and a doctorate in biochemistry, both from the University of Toronto. She came to Houston to pursue postdoctoral studies at Baylor, at the Baylor College of Medicine. Those studies were in cell biology and heart disease. And then she stayed here to join the faculty at the University of Texas Health Science Center, where for 22 years, Eva was director of the Genetic Engineering and Stem Cell Laboratory. Some 5 years ago, she moved to Houston Methodist Hospital, joining the Department of Oncology. And there, she teaches and mentors physicians in how to run clinical trials. There is, however, another side, and a profound one, to this complex persona. Since her teenage years, Eva has pursued various forms of meditation and yoga, and she has undergone an array of spiritual and psychic experiences, including precognitive and telepathic dreams, an out-of-body experience, parent channeling, and astonishing synchronicities. Read that. Yeah. Maybe she'll tell us more about those matters. Currently, I should note, Eva is bringing these two sides of herself together by conducting clinical trials using visualization meditation with cancer patients. Now that certainly is a practice that we can unequivocally call noetic science. It's with pride and pleasure that Houston Ions presents to you Dr. Eva Zsigmond.
Wow, thank you so much, Mark. I learned so much about myself. I think your insights into my life's journey are much more profound than my own introspections ever have been. Thank you. So today's talk is, the title is The Shaman's Gift to a Quantum Universe, Ancient Wisdom for Navigating Modern Reality. So the good news is that this is a very big and fascinating topic that we can explore together today. The bad news is that I am not an expert in either quantum physics or shamanism. As Mark has pointed out, sorry, it's not advancing. Working before. Oh, great, thank you so much.
Oh, it's still jumped back.
There we go. It's working. Thank you. Thank you. As Mark has pointed out, my background is not in physics, but in the biological sciences. I won't go into it because Mark has covered it so graciously. And in terms of my spiritual interest, I have been a long-time meditator, tried various forms of meditation, as well as Reiki energy healing. My Reiki teacher, Melanie Harrell, has joined us today, which I'm very happy to have her here. So why would a biochemist and meditator try to really tackle these big topics that are not really related to her field? Well, I think my only excuse is curiosity. I have always been fascinated by physics, and it was a really hard choice to figure out whether I would go into the biological sciences or physics when I was in college, but then biological sciences have won out.
Good, honey.
But even as, even a younger child, one of my favorite things to do was to go for walks with my dad and ask him like big, ridiculous questions. When, what came before the Big Bang, and what will be, where does infinity end? And, he would just listen to me and wonder, how I'm ever going to find answers to these. My interest in shamanism has also been around for a long, long time. And my first exposure to shamanic teachings was from the mind-bending books of Carlos Castaneda as a teenager and his teacher, Don Juan. Those were really, really fascinating books. And then later on, I came across the works of Jose Stevens. Jose Stevens is a psychologist and trained shaman, and he wrote a series of wonderful books about how to use shamanic techniques in everyday life. So it's a little bit more accessible than the Castaneda books. I was also fascinated by the work of Mark Plotkin, who's an ethnobotanist, and he spent many years in the Amazon working with shamans. And he really tried to learn from them about what medicinal plants were used by the shamans and then to bring them back so they can benefit modern medicine. On a more personal note, my husband and I were married by a shaman, White Owl. He was from the Sioux Indian tribe, and we were married in Sedona on a New Year's Eve at sundown. And White Owl led us to a medicine wheel that he has constructed up in the Red Hills of Sedona. And after we finished saying our vows and smoking a peace pipe, which he assured us only had tobacco in it, then the coyotes started howling. It was really incredible. It was like just like on cue how these coyotes, we were surrounded by them and they were like putting on a concert for us. So I'm not sure how White Owl managed that, but hey, he was a shaman. So this is an overview of the presentation that I will try to share with you today. So first I will discuss some of the core principles of shamanism. Then I will give you a brief introduction into quantum physics, and I hope to be brief, I promise. I'll look at some of the parallels between shamanism and quantum concepts. And then we'll touch upon Jungian perspectives about the psyche and the material world. At the end, I hope to summarize the shaman's gift. So let's start with the definition of what a shaman is. Shaman is actually an Evenki word, so I didn't know what that was, but Evenki is a tribe in Siberia. And the meaning is seer, or someone who penetrates truth, I guess, to the source. A more official definition is a tribal healer who can perceive the fundamental nature of the universe and acts as a medium between the visible and the spirit world. I think that's a very nice definition of what a shaman is. One that I like even more than that definition is this very whimsical one, is that he's a self-reliant explorer of the endless mansions of a magnificent hidden universe. Isn't that wonderful? Hidden, endless mansions of a magnificent hidden universe. I think that's just wonderful. So shamans have been around in like every continent has some sort of version of a shaman. And they also come by many different names like medicine man, walker between worlds, healer, magician, priestess, and yes, shamans can be both men and women, witch doctor, wizard. So they come by many, many different names. To define shamanism, it is the practice in which one intentionally enters altered states of communication with spirits, ancestors, or forces of nature, and in order to heal and gain knowledge. And very importantly, in order to guide their community. So the shaman's primary goal is, he does all these amazing things, but always brings it back to help the community, to help the tribe. Some historians also define shamanism as an archaic technique of ecstasy or a disciplined method for entering a trance or altered state of consciousness in order to access sacred knowledge. Equally important is what shamanism is not. So shamanism is not a single religion. It varies from different countries, different parts of the world. There are some common elements, but it is not one single religion. It's also not a primitive superstition, nor is it a mental illness. So those are very important distinctions. With the mental illness, it may look like when they're in a trance that there is something wrong with the shaman, but it's actually a learned, culturally structured technique that they go through, and it's very different from the spontaneous thing that a psychotic would have. It is also different from modern neo-shamanic spirituality. So I also didn't know what that was, but apparently a lot of the elements of shamanism have been co-opted by modern new age type of methods, and that's called neo-shamanic spirituality. So the difference is that these would be individual techniques that would kind of cater to more the everyday needs of the individual rather than the deep-rooted ways that a shaman would have had served through history. So there's a distinction between the two. So the importance of shamans to their communities cannot be overstated. And this is the ethnobotanist Mark Plotkin, who I think summarizes this very nicely, and I will read it to you. Quite probably the human race would not have survived without the presence of shamans, because they were the first doctors. They knew what plants could be used for medicine, and they could see where to direct hunters to find game. The shamans could predict the weather and had many skills that were critical for the survival of communities. So now let's go through to see some, what are these critical skills that they had that were so integral to the survival of their communities. So these may be summarized as, the core shamanic practices seen here: healing, being guides to their communities, and then being spiritual leaders of their communities are the three lines.
Go.
So in terms of healers, they use medicinal plants and spiritual healing techniques. The shamans serve as guides, accessing new or lost knowledge and foretelling the future. So that is one major way that they can guide their communities. And then they serve as spiritual leaders, or they become guides and bridges between the outer reality and their inner vision reality of the spirit world. So now I'll go into one by one in a little more detail about all these shamanic skills. So first, there really are the masters of healing. They use plants to great effect. And this was a really exciting finding that I came across, that the shamans of the Aztec people, it was found and more recently studied by scientists, they used 118 different plants for healing. And it was found by, again, scientific methods that 85% of these medicinal plants had some efficacious pharmaceutical effect. And some examples that are, just quite amazing are that they obtained aspirin from willow bark, digitalis from foxglove, and they even used moldy bread that they would put on wounds to heal, and as a source of antibiotics. So in fact, the shamans had probably discovered penicillin hundreds of, if not thousands of years before modern medicine discovered penicillin. Did you want me to go on quickly? Too much talk here?
I'm trying to get this removed.
Okay, I need to go back. So the second aspect of, besides using plants, the shamans also use psychic healing. Here they use visions and dreams to see a cure. So this is something common that's their way of diagnosis, that they actually go into a trance state and then they see the cure, what it would be. and then bring it back and then use different techniques to heal the patient. One can be that there was a story that I was reading that there was a patient who the shaman has never seen that type of disease before, and he was trying to figure out, what plant or what medicine to use. And then the shaman went into a trance, and it saw that there was a plant somewhere several mountains away that would help the patient. And it sent out the tribal warriors to retrieve it and brought it back. Fortunately, there was an ethnobotanist there who then examined what it was and also examined the patient. And it was found that the patient had diabetes. And the plant that was retrieved had insulin-like effects that, actually lessened the diabetes of the patient. So that was, quite incredible. So that is one way of psychic healing by using these methods. The other one is hands-on healing, similar to what Reiki would be. And then the shamans are also masters of the placebo effect. So they use the power of suggestion very, very effectively. As scientists study more these amazing healing techniques of the shamans, the more they conclude, and here I can't see, but I can wing it, as scientists, we can't afford the luxury of ethnocentric snobbery, which assumes that primitive cultures do not have something significant to contribute to modern medicine. So that is something that is being concluded more and more as shamanic techniques are being studied. So the second major gift of the shaman to their communities is to act as guides. They do this again with their vision quest. They commune with spirits of the ancestors, of animals, of plants, and they even commune with elements like rocks and rivers and lakes. The shaman can astral travel to different locations in their altered states of consciousness, and then time travel to the past and foresee the future. Very early on in shamanic training, the shaman usually meets a spirit guide or a power animal, once again in an altered state of consciousness. And then these power animals or spirit guides become their guides as they do their subsequent journeying or vision quest. The shaman then brings all this information back to advise the community and also to interpret their findings. So that's an important aspect of the shaman's gift, is that, some of us, if we have these great visions, we wouldn't be able to interpret it and make it relevant to the community or the tribe. So the final major role of the shaman is to be spiritual leader for the community. There really are reservoirs of ancestral wisdom. And in that role, they try to serve as a bridge between inner experience and outer reality. Since shamanic traditions have been passed on from generations to generations for thousands of years now, they really are the teachers who pass this on and train the next generation of shamans. So that's a very important role. And then they preside over rituals, which are very important for their service to the community. Some historians would say that the medicine man or shaman represents the most ancient profession in the evolution of human culture. So that's a pretty big statement. I always heard that, there was another profession that was the oldest profession of humanity. So we won't go there. Let's leave it with the shaman. So having heard all these amazing things that a shaman can do, would you like to develop your own shamanic abilities? Yes, I certainly would. So this is how we can do it. So the first step is to learn how to work with energy of the environment and the energies in our bodies. So the shaman learns to get attuned to the energy of the environment, to electromagnetism, to the energy of the sun, to the wind. And that is something that they learn first and very importantly in their training. it is also equally, one example for this would be that, just like animals do that, I think animals naturally have that being attuned to the environment. So I think we've all heard of animals moving away from areas where there might be a volcanic eruption. And so the shaman tries to learn, what are the signals that the animals would feel well before our modern instruments would detect that they might come a volcanic eruption. And then the second aspect is to learn with the energies in the body. And from the Eastern wisdom traditions, we would call those the chakra systems, various energy centers in the body. They learn about that and also about auras. And they diagnose their patients frequently by looking at the auras and their energy centers. The second step, once we have learned how to do all that, is to use altered states of consciousness to journey to other worlds and other dimensions. And then to bring back the knowledge and interpret it, synthesize it, and simplify it for the community. So before we go on any further, I'd like to take a moment to talk about altered states of consciousness and to see the neuroscience perspective of what an altered state of consciousness is. So an altered state of consciousness is a change in the perception or self-boundaries, and also a change in how we sense time. This happens by ego softening or a temporary reduction in the rigidity, I guess, of our executive functions, our frontal lobes. And by having this temporary softening of that control, there's increased crosstalk between sensory, emotional, and memory systems. There's also very key distinction between shamanic practice versus pathology, as I have mentioned before. One is a structured, learned, deliberate state, whereas uncontrolled state of altered levels of consciousness would be something that would be like a psychotic or schizophrenic might experience. So that's an important distinction to note. So this sentence summarizes nicely the neuroscience perspective of altered states of consciousness. For the shamanic altered states of consciousness are not neurological glitches. There are culturally refined ways of reorganizing the brain to access imagery, emotion, meaning, and healing that ordinary consciousness suppresses. So that is, a really wonderful way to look at it, that it is something that we all have. We can all achieve these non-ordinary states of consciousness, but our ordinary, everyday consciousness, ego-driven, suppresses these levels of consciousness. And with the shamanic training, they're able to open up to it. So what are the tools in the shaman's toolbox to be able to achieve all these amazing things? Well, the first important one is meditation. So shamans do a lot of meditations to train. These meditations may be breath work, maybe chanting, gazing into the fire, all different types of meditations to kind of open the mind and enable them to have these altered states. Mm-hmm. The shamans also love to use drumming and dancing as a way of entering trance states. Scientists have found that the drumming rhythms that the shamans use, which are 4 to 7 beats per second, are actually, when they measure brain waves, are very conducive to humans getting into a trance. So the shamans really know what they're doing with that. The shamans also don't shy away from using hallucinogenic plants like ayahuasca, the wine of the soul. So they use that to a great effect. Lucid dreaming and becoming a surrogate dreamer is also in the toolbox. So the shamans learn to do lucid dreaming, meaning that they wake up in a dream, knowing that they're in a dream, and then they can direct the direction of their dreams. Surrogate dreaming is an interesting concept that they actually in a dream state, enter the dream of another person, somebody they might be able to, they're interested in helping or curing them. And then they help direct the cure of that patient in their dreams. And this was very interesting because I also learned when I was researching this that this surrogate dreaming technique is something that is also used by Tibetan Buddhists as well as the shamans. That's pretty cool. And then finally, the shaman uses energy work, the chakra system, and other ways of really balancing the inner and outer energy fields that they have learned so much about. So, since energy is a very important component of becoming a shaman, now let me talk to you a little bit about the study of energy, physics. So physics is the study of energy and matter. There are two branches of physics, classical physics and modern physics. Modern physics includes quantum mechanics and relativity theory. So the way to look at these two different aspects of physics is that classical physics came before the early 1900s, at the time of Isaac Newton, and quantum physics or modern physics came after the early 1900s, and this was the time of Einstein and Planck and other quantum physicists. Comparing the two, classical physics deals with objects that are like in our everyday life, something that we can perceive with our senses, with our eyes. And also these are at low speeds, so the velocity of these objects are much, much lower than the speed of light. This is in contrast to modern physics that deals with the microscopic at the atomic level. And it also deals with the super macroscopic level like galaxies. And it is at a much higher speed. So the speeds are approaching the speed of light. Other distinctions between the two is that classical physics deals with certainty. Everything is determinable, predictable, whereas modern physics is all about uncertainty and probability. In classical physics, mass and energy are separate. Object versus light, they're separate. Whereas in modern physics, they're interconvertible, according to Einstein's famous equation, E is equal to mc squared. So now I'll bore you just for one more minute about some of the history of quantum physics, and these are some of the milestones. Max Planck was the first one to actually come up and coin the term of quanta. And he found that energy is not continuous, but it comes in these little packets that he called quanta, so hence the name quantum physics. Later, Einstein showed that light behaves both as a wave, so it's a continuous, never-ending wave, and it's also a particle at the same time, can be both. And that's these particles of light are called photons, and he developed the photoelectric effect. Other major players in the development of quantum theory were Schrödinger and Heisenberg, who developed a lot of the mathematical framework. And then later on, Einstein and others, they came up with the idea of quantum entanglement, meaning that two connected or entangled particles will respond to each other simultaneously across distance, non-locality. Einstein called that spooky action at a distance. Sounds pretty spooky. So to sum up the difference between classical physics and quantum physics, it would be as easy as this. Classical physics is the world of the common sense, and quantum physics is the world of the strange. So very, very strange. And now I'll tell you just how strange quantum physics is. So I'll describe to you 4 different aspects of quantum physics that will show you and blow your mind. The first one is superposition. That's the scientific term. That means that everything is multi-layered. So what it means that matter can exist simultaneously in 2 different forms. So the famous example thought experiment for this is Schrodinger's cat. So in this thought experiment, we put a cat into a box, locked the box up, and within that box, the cat in the quantum state, in quantum physics, is both alive and dead at the same time. It's not that it's one or the other, it's that both are true at the same time until we open a box and observe which one it is. So that is the idea of superposition, matter existing in multiple phases at the same time. To lighten things up, I have a little joke for you. Why are quantum physicists good at keeping secrets? Because they don't let the cat out of the bag. Okay, the second, probabilistic. So in quantum physics, matter and energy just have probable locations. We can't really know where anything is. So an example of this would be that in regular classical physics that we can see and know of, if we have a ball and roll it down a hill, and we know the mass of the ball and the angle of the trajectory of the hill, we can determine where the ball will end up. Not so in quantum physics. If we roll a tiny little atom down a tiny little hill in quantum physics, that atom will roll in multiple different paths simultaneously. And we will not know which is the actual path of the atom until we observe it. So the observer kind of makes the atom choose the path. Mind-bending, right? This is how to remember it. An interviewer asks a quantum physicist, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" He responds, "Everywhere, until you actually hire me." Remember it. Okay, third, entanglement. Non-locality. So here the idea is that if two electrons or pieces of particles are entangled together, then we can separate them by vast distances across the world or even to other galaxies. And if something is being done to one of the electrons, the other one will immediately, simultaneously respond to that. Like there is a communication between them that, is really not understood how they communicate, but they're entangled, so they communicate. A quantum physicist gets into a bar fight. Before he even receives the first punch, his twin brother in another city already has a black eye. That's intentional. Okay, the last one, the observer effect. So this one is also, very, very strange. The observer affects the outcome. This is usually shown by this famous experiment, the double slit experiment. So here we have a source of light that we're shining through something that has two slits in it. The light goes through the two slits, as you can see there. And since light is a wave, it has wave properties. And as the two waves come out of the two slits, they will interfere with each other the same way that waves would. And then there is a pattern that is projected on the other end, that shows that there is interference. And in fact, light is a wave. So if we do the exact same experiment, with the only difference being that we actually add a light detector, what happens is that light starts behaving like a particle, not a wave at all. There's no interference pattern, and it has the photoelectric effect, which shows that it's actually a wave, that it's actually a particle. So the only difference being that we're observing it. That is pretty wild. So I promise my last corny joke. A quantum physicist gets into this is not right, the next one. A shaman and a quantum physicist walk into a bar. Or maybe they don't, depending on who sees them. All righty, so quantum physics, what did it provide to us? the fact that we don't know what anything is, we don't know if it's alive, dead, we don't know if it's a particle or a wave, we don't know what anything is, superposition. Second, we don't know where anything is or when it is, because everything is just probabilities. We don't know how things are connected, but we know that they're profoundly connected through entanglement. And then when we try to measure to determine any of these, and we change all the parameters, and we don't know anything, what it is or where it is anyway, because we have changed everything by simply observing it. So quantum physics has given us a lot of uncertainty. We're not alone with, feeling really bewildered, because Niels Bohr, one of the forefathers of quantum physics, said, if quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. So I think we're all on board with that. Yet, quantum physics has also given us a lot that we can be thankful for. It is at the backbone of modern technologies. Lasers such as barcodes and laser eye surgery, they're all based on quantum physical properties. Semiconductors in our chips in our computers and our phones also, thanks to quantum physics. MRI machines, same there, and our GPS systems that we use all the time, they're all based on quantum concept. We also have very high hopes for quantum physics in the future. It will fuel the next wave of innovation. Quantum computing is already coming online, and these computers will enable to solve problems in seconds, what would take our current computers millions of years. It is also hoped that quantum networking will make our communications globally much more secure. Disease detection and environmental monitoring will also be improved by quantum sensors. And then there is high hope that new materials will be discovered through quantum physical properties. The effects of quantum physics also had a deep societal effect. The quantum physics has really destabilized Western certainty in science, certainty about what we can believe, what things are. And this felt mystical even to physicists. So in fact, the first people who drew these parallels between spirituality and shamanism and quantum physics were the physicists themselves. Schrödinger studied Eastern philosophy, and he questioned the subject-object divisions. David Bohm, he looked at inner and outer realities as undivided whole, and he felt that science and spirituality were trying to say the same thing, but just using different language. So the parallels between quantum physics and shamanism and Eastern spirituality as well were first highlighted by the physicists. So now let's look at these parallels a little bit more deeply. So quantum physics, the first one, multiple states of matter, superposition. The shaman is totally on board with this. Multiple states of being is, something that they in shamanic traditions have always been there. The shaman can be sitting down in his regular body, and at the same time, his spirit form could be astral traveling or shape-shifting. So there's multiple states of being for the shaman. The second, the probabilistic universe. For the quantum physics, that everything is a potential. There's no certainty of time and space. Probable outcomes of matter are the way things are. The shaman already knew this, that they're probable outcomes of the future. In the divinations, the shaman never says that this is the set future. It's always a probability of the future. And very interestingly, shamanic traditions believe that rituals and various techniques of altered state of consciousness can shift that probability towards one outcome. And so I guess, in our modern society, this would be more the idea of intentions. When we use intentions, we feel like we're shifting the outcome to a certain trajectory of the future. The third one is that distant particles interact, spooky distance of apart. For the shaman, yeah, everything interacts, animals, plants, spirit world. We're all in this web of existence all together, and shamans have been teaching that for hundreds and thousands of years, really. And then finally, the effect of the observer on the observation. The physicist noted that it's really important how you question in order to make the observation go a certain way. So, by measuring that light in the double slit experiment, that forces the light to become a particle. The shaman is totally on board with this because he feels that consciousness affects the outcome. So the shaman goes a step further. It's not just that the observation and the observer are linked, but it's that he feels that consciousness could actually change reality. And this is through structured attention. So again, it's through ritual and through the various steps that shamans do in order to consciously affect the outcome of something or reality. So one way to summarize these parallels is that both quantum physics and shamanism challenge naive materialism. So the emphasis here is on naive materialism of a solid, predictable, objective universe. And they both suggest that reality is stranger, more relational, and less fixed than it appears. Even though that these parallels are very compelling, that sometimes the comparison goes too far or goes wrong. It is wrong to compare the symbolic direct experience directly as proof of concept of cause and effect. So in other words, metaphors and interpersonal experiences cannot be used to skip scientific discoveries, observations, measurements. They cannot be replaced just by personal experience. Looking at it the other way, using quantum language to legitimize spiritual claims is also problematic. One important distinction here is that quantum physics does not claim that human consciousness affects the observation. It just says that the observer and the observation are linked, whereas shamanism treats consciousness as causal and intentional. So there's a very clear distinction there. Or as Edgar Cayce would say, the spirit is life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. Quantum physics is not on board with that. So having looked at all these parallels and also the problems with using the parallels, too strictly, why is it that even today, the link between quantum physics and shamanism persists? Well, one of the reasons is that reality is still very strange and we don't understand it. It escapes a simple explanation. So if you think about it, what we know about our universe, it is very, very little. It's less than 5%. 5% is what we have detected as matter, and the other 95% is dark energy and dark matter that we know nothing about. Also, the theory of everything in physics itself is still elusive. The theory of everything was an equation that Einstein and others were trying to find to combine the four fundamental forces of nature, which are electromagnetism, weak weak nuclear forces and strong nuclear forces, and gravity. So the first three, they work together very nicely, and there are equations that can sum them up. But when gravity is added to the mix, there's incongruity within the mathematics. So that's the theory of everything that has been sought by Einstein and others, and is still being worked on today to no avail. Einstein called that theory and that equation that he was looking for the God equation. string theory and M theory and other more current theories are trying to reconcile these four fundamental forces, but they're still working on it. The second reason why the link still persists today is consciousness. We really don't know what human consciousness is all about. It still remains poorly understood. There are many theories, but I don't think we have consensus. We're also facing an ecological crisis as we're slowly disturbing and destroying our Earth. And the shaman's view of this connected web that we're all a part of and not separate from is also something that's very appealing, kind of helps propagate this parallel. And then technology is really outpacing our wisdom. No better example than AI. Will AI save humanity or will it destroy it? Hard to tell. So in order to, gain a little bit more wisdom about all these, now I will do a sharp turn to somebody very wise, Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, and see how he viewed these very parallel and that very distinct traditions. So Jung strongly believed that reason is not the only way of knowing. He believed in intuition, dreams, synchronicity. Synchronicities are not acausal, meaningful coincidences. And it was very interesting that he actually developed this concept of synchronicity through conversations with his friend, Wolfgang Pauli, who was a physicist and Nobel laureate. And his theories on quantum indeterminacy was something that Jung found very interesting. Together, the psychologist Jung and the physicist Pauli, they also worked on unus mundi concept, one world, which means that mind and matter are one. And the split between outer and inner realities is an illusion. The way Jung tried to reconcile is through archetypes and symbols, and he felt that using these somehow integrated the two. Coincidentia oppositorum, or the union of contradictory forces, is also something that Jung really was attuned to. He really felt that by holding such opposites as quantum physics represents, is something that is important for the growth or individuation of the person towards a wholeness of the psyche. So for him, the examples were that in order to get to the individual, go through the individuation process, to reconcile the conscious with the unconscious mind. And he found parallels with this in science, quantum science. So Jung really knew how to speak the language of quantum physics. So for him, synchronicity was an example that quantum physicists show that it's an undetermined strict causality. So they questioned that cause and effect was not as strict and still making something real as we thought before. The observer effect, that observation affects the outcome, was also something that Jung could get on board with, because for his idea of unus mundi was that mind and matter are one, and therefore, of course, that the observer would affect the observation. It was not a strange concept from that direction. And then the idea of duality or dual state superposition, that's, for him represented the union of contradictory realities. Jung was also very much on board with shamanism. For him, the spirit world that the shamans talked about was nothing else than the collective unconscious. So yeah. And he felt that these spirit worlds or journeys to the spirit world felt other or foreign or different to the practitioner was because it was an archetype that was not under the control of the ego. Animal spirits or our power animal guides, Jung called these instinctual psychic energies that are not something foreign or different that only shamans can have access to, but it's a part of all of us. These are all our own personal instinctual psychic energies that we may not be aware of, but we could develop. And then the synchronicity, again, meaningful alignments between the inner and outer worlds that the shaman notices. Jung called it as a synchronicity. So for him, the shaman was a living encounter with archetypes, which kind of for him brought it all together. So therefore, from a Jungian perspective, shamanism and quantum physics are parallel symbolic responses. One is mythic, one is scientific. And these responses are to the same archetypal encounter with a reality that exceeds rational control and speaks of a primordial, timeless wholeness behind the perceived duality of the world. That's a lot to take in. So, same language, one is mythic, one is scientific, responds to the perceived duality of the world. To simplify this a little bit, I really think that Jung really captured the truisms here. Shamanism and quantum physics have conceptual resonance, not equivalence. And they converge as complementary lenses, not as interchangeable explanations. So let's look at these complementary lenses because they are very hauntingly similar between the two. The physicist would say there is an ordinary world that works according to the everyday laws of classical physics. The shaman would respond to this the same statement, except just one word difference. There is an ordinary world that works according to the everyday laws of nature. The physicist would then go on, but there's also a non-ordinary world or a quantum world that works according to an entirely different, more flexible set of rules. And the shaman would wholeheartedly agree that there is a non-ordinary world, a spirit world that works according to an entirely different, more flexible rules. And these two worlds are not separate. The shaman knows it, and the physicist is still trying to reconcile it. And maybe doing it for a long time. So to help the physicist reconcile it, when the physicist says, I will believe it when I see it, maybe he should listen to the shaman who would say, I will see it when I believe it. So what is the gift of the shaman to a quantum universe? Well, I think it is teaching us a way to think. The shaman teaches us to be with paradox, to be with uncertainty, interconnection, and participation. When we're faced with a paradox that we can't reconcile, the shaman tells us to approach it with an open mind, because insights emerge from holding opposites true at the same time. When we make up our minds too quickly about something, then we use the ability to learn, to hold paradox with an open mind. Second is to navigate uncertainty without fear and with creativity. Again, premature certainty destroys meaning. The shaman is the role model of interconnection. They integrate symbolic wisdom with rational inquiry, and they form a bridge between inner experience and outer reality. And then finally, the shaman's gift is to remind us of our ethical responsibility and holistic connection to our community, our planet, and to the cosmos. So the parting words of wisdom of the shaman are: walk slowly, observe deeply, participate fully, and embrace the mystery. Thank you.
We're gonna look and see what kind of questions we have from the Zoom group. And then we'll also get questions from this, so get your questions ready.
And answers.
And answers. We want questions and answers simultaneously, but not simultaneous. All right,
You want the to continue?
yeah, we can finish. Let's go ahead and, no, go ahead and start. Do we have any questions from the community, from the Zoom community? If you would type them in chat, then I can read it.
No, they can also unmute and
Oh,
speak
oh,
up.
you can unmute yourself and ask a question.